What's going on, everybody? Mike here. It's a fantastic day. I got my Subaru Redline Cobb intake ready to go. The carbon fiber version that just came out. We're going to get it installed here in the Subi shortly, but what we need to do is unbox it and basically do the pre-installation setup with all the foam and the brackets and whatnot. So we're going to do that. We're going to get kind of a close-up look at it. I'm going to try to make this video not too long because it can be pretty lengthy. I think I might actually have to remove my bumper during the installation because I have aftermarket parts. I don't know. We'll see what's going on. So let's go ahead and unbox this thing. I have already pulled it out and inspected it just to make sure that I'm not pulling out a broken carbon fiber piece on camera. So let's go ahead and pull this thing out. I'm gonna have to take this box down and we're gonna do this in pieces. So it is pretty big, large boy here. All right, so the first thing we have is a bunch of paper covering it up. So this isn't packaged like the alternator cover. This one doesn't have that expandable foam. So we're gonna go ahead and pull out the big carbon fiber piece first. We'll give that a look. And I'm gonna take this over here and pull these out here separately. So the carbon fiber piece itself, I've already looked at it, again, to make sure everything looks good. But it is packaged in a nice plastic covering and some thin foam to protect it. So we'll go ahead and pull this off here. Try to get a somewhat unboxing of this to see what you guys will get when you guys buy one. And of course we'll get some close-up shots here in a bit. Staticky cling on it, but there we go. Let's go ahead and spin this around so we can see it. It has a really nice carbon fiber weave to it, really nice piece. And the reason I'm getting this late is because the manufacturing process, I guess, had some defects in the ones that originally were sent to Cobb on their second run. And Cobb was not going to send out a product that wasn't up to their standard. So it's good to know that their quality assurance is doing their job very well, as I obviously expect from Cobb. There's the end piece. That's another inlet port to let air come in. I'm assuming, I haven't really looked much up onto this, but there is an aluminum block-off plate that goes here to reduce some of the intake sounds, which I don't know why you'd want to do. It's kind of the whole point of buying one of these intakes, but for people who don't want it, I guess you can do that. So if we can kind of see inside, you do see the carbon fiber weave inside. They have gone through the extra step of glossing it on the inside, so when you're looking in, you don't just see the dry carbon. But inside the intake itself, you do actually see the dry carbon. Pretty nice. This thing is featherweight. I don't have a scale, but it is quite lightweight. So we're gonna go ahead and set this to the side, and I don't wanna break it, so we're gonna set it over here. All right, so next off in this box is the hose pipe that connects to is wrapped in a kind of a shrink wrap plastic, so we'll go ahead and get that out. So we have a shrink wrap hose. We've got a white box. I don't know what's in it. I haven't opened these up. I just inspected the intake itself. So we have the, I'm assuming, hardware in here. Little bag full of little goodies and hardware. And then we have a bracket, a pretty nice piece. Looks like another steel item. So another steel bracket here. Then we have some more brackets and some grommets, and I'll have to look at where all these things go. There's a lot of pieces in this kit. Oh wow, that's really nice. That's a nice touch. So it looks like the actual clamps for the hose itself, we can get this thing to focus, they're a nice black color instead of silver. So that's a nice touch to see on this kit. Really nice touch. We have some aluminum pieces. So these are the pieces that are gonna require me to probably remove my front bumper in order to attach the intake. We have some foam pieces, which we'll go ahead and install that stuff here in a bit. We have the aluminum piece itself to install the intake, and again, I'll pull all this stuff out here in a moment. And then another aluminum piece, which is the block off, which we won't be using. Set that aside. More Cobb stickers, which I'm not gonna use, Ken. I'm not a sticker guy, so we're gonna go ahead and keep those over here. And packaged by Matt. Seems like Matt packages everything, so that guy is awesome. And then also in the other box that I found in here, is the filter. We got another performance air filter cleaning instructions. That's kind of nice. So we have the new MAF housing. The new MAF housing. It looks to be the exact same one as the one on the big SF kit, which I currently have installed in my car. So I will transfer everything over. It's probably not needed, but I will transfer it over just because this is brand new. And then the intake air filter, which is a lot bigger. Wow, that's a lot bigger than my other one. And I think Cobb says it's about 35% bigger than the big SF kit. I don't know how that's gonna affect my tune. They say it's not supposed to affect your tune whatsoever, but we'll see. I'll have to do some fourth gear polls and send it off to my tutor to see if everything's gonna be good. But I trust Cobb, and they say that it's not gonna affect anything, so we'll get all this put together here in a moment. So here's all the kit pieces laid out. We have our performance air filter, our new MAF housing, our hose, our inlet hose, which feels like it's bigger than the big SF. Our two clamps, it looks like the pre-laser cut foam pieces, which I'll have to look at where these go. We have our new mounting bracket. We have a block off plate that goes on the side of the intake. We have the actual plate that mounts to the air filter. From what I can tell, this probably mounts to the MAF itself, which we'll go over here in a minute. We have hardware. We have two kind of weird aluminum plug things, which I think is where the intake hooks onto on the front bumper, 4 grommets, and another small little bracket. So I'm gonna go and check out where everything's supposed to go, and we'll go from there. All right, so first things first, since I'm looking at the foam here, I'm gonna tear out all these little foam pieces and lay them out and figure out where they're gonna go. All right, so we got all the foam pieces taken out. And it looks like this one is a 2-piece, which is gonna go on the outside piece that goes with this aluminum. So we're not gonna be using that because I'm gonna keep mine open, so we're gonna set these aside. And then you got the big circle, which has these little cutouts for the bolts. That's gonna hold the intake actually into the actual intake housing itself. So pop these little circles out, and then we're gonna go ahead and attach it here in a moment. But what I wanted to do is to attach these small foam pieces to the brackets themselves so I can set those out of the way. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna start off with is this long rectangle foam piece. It appears to go on the bracket right here. All right, so we'll peel this off and we will place this, see if I can do this on camera. So I'm gonna set the hole on there first because that's the part that really matters. There we go. So we got that bracket piece with the foam piece. I'm assuming this is gonna butt up against the side of the car, so you don't wanna scratch it. Next one we have is this tiny little piece that appears one of the grommets you're gonna go into, so we'll install it here in a moment after we're done with the piece of foam. But this foam looks like it's gonna adhere onto here, and you can kind of see how it's a little bit thicker of the foam down here and a little bit thinner, and it kind of conforms with the metal itself, so we're gonna go ahead and apply that on there. All right, so this adhesive backing is kind of a pain in the butt to get off. See if I can again do this on camera. Lining up these grooves. There we go. So that is nice and padded. So we have that piece. And since we have that out, we're gonna take one of these 4 rubber grommets that it comes with, and it doesn't look like it's directional anyway, so we're gonna go ahead and apply that inside the big hole that's on this bracket. There we go. So we have that grommet and that foam pad on this bracket here. And now that I'm looking at it, it looks like one of those grommets goes inside this brace itself too. So go ahead and apply that one in there. There we go. So now we got a nice grommet in that one. It looks like the 2 brackets are done at this point. 2 grommets are gonna go here in the openings. Those 2 grommets go right there on the actual intake opening snorkel itself. This foam piece with its adhesive backing is gonna go right here in this ring to where the filter is gonna sit. Now, since this is such a large piece, I would recommend peeling at one of the holes. All right, so tear at the foam right at one of the holes, and we're gonna cut a slit in this piece of paper here, adhesive backing. That way we can do this in a rotational manner instead of just placing this whole thing down. So if I get in front of the camera, I apologize. I'm gonna try to do this as much as I can on camera. So we're gonna go ahead and set this down over the circle. Trying to keep it as neat as possible, and then we'll pull the adhesive as we go. And try not to stretch the foam itself. And if this is properly laser cut, it should lay down. And don't set it down until you think it's sure where it's gonna be. So there we go, we have that over there. And you're gonna have to be kind of delicate with this because again, you don't want to stretch this foam out. You want it to lay down flat and in line with the holes. And if you need to pull it up lightly, that's okay. I'm gonna have to get in front of the camera here for a second. Get this side over here, but you'll see the finished result here in a moment. And it's foam, so it's a little forgiving. So it looks like you're gonna have to stretch it slightly for it to lay on here. So it's not gonna go on perfectly, but now that you see that it's on there, I'm gonna go ahead and just lightly press around the rim. And it should be on there. So now we have that, and hold it up to the camera real quick so you can see the foam is on there and pretty much in line with all the holes. All right, so for the next assembly piece, we're gonna be taking the filter itself, the MAF housing, and the bracket that holds everything in. Now there is a specific way to put this on the actual MAF housing. If you look at the piece itself, you'll notice that there are 3 cutouts that coincide with the MAF itself that has the bolts. All right, but there's also gonna be where the MAF sensor is connected, and these raised sections will get in the way. So it's gonna be kind of like a little puzzle piece to go on there. Now, the ridges are gonna be facing the outside. So when you install it, you're gonna be pushing it through. We're pushing it through this way. Now you'll see how it's catching on the MAF sensor location. So you're gonna use one of the cutouts here. See if I can line that up here on the camera. And it's gonna slip over. You see how it's slipping over here? So it's gonna slip over that to clear all that. And then what you're gonna take is some of the provided hardware with the screws lined up, just like that, and we'll go ahead and bolt it down. So Cobb provided a Allen key, and there's gonna be these small screws that are provided with the kit. We're gonna go ahead and attach those in there loosely. So we have these nice and loosely set in here, and we're gonna wanna go ahead and center the MAF in this housing and go ahead and tighten down these screws. And if everything looks nice and centered, which it does to me, I'm gonna go ahead and cinch these down, but I'm not gonna overly crank it. You want it nice and tight, but you don't want it so tight that you think you're actually gonna crack this plastic housing. So now that we have that piece, we're gonna go ahead and transfer the MAF sensor over here in a minute. I'm gonna do that at the last moment because this is gonna be outside of the intake itself. But the next step, we're gonna go ahead and stick the air filter on. And it doesn't seem like it needs to be on there any particular way, but because I'm anal, I'm going to make sure that this little crease right here is gonna face the opposite direction of the MAF because the MAF is completely top, or is the complete top. So we'll go ahead and place the filter on here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and line it up because again, I'm OCD. I'm gonna line up the clamp with that metal piece, and then using a 8mm socket and ratchet, we're gonna tighten this down. Don't use impact tools or air tools because you can crush and ruin these things. It doesn't need to be on there super tight, it just needs to be nice and snug. And it's kind of hard to explain to you what snug is, but you'll know what I'm talking about. There we go. So now we have the filter and MAF assembly completed. We're gonna go ahead and drop this into the intake itself. All right, so we have the intake. We're gonna get ready to drop this in here. Again, there's gonna be one of those weird angles to where I'm gonna try to get it on camera without interfering in it. But we're gonna take this, and the top of the intake is obviously this flat piece right here, and the way it's gonna go in is with the MAF facing up, the MAF central location just like this. So you can kind of see how it is like that with this facing up. And then we're going to take the supplied hardware and bolt this all together. To bolt this up, you're going to use 4 of the supplied button head cap screws. These are going to be some of the longer ones. So we're going to go ahead and place these in here and finger tighten until we get them all in. And once we get them all kind of finger tight, we're going to come back and torque them down. And since this is being torqued into carbon fiber essentially, but with threaded inserts, we don't want to crank the ever-living crap out of it. Again, this isn't under any kind of stress, this is just holding it in the housing. So after we get these nice and snug with our fingertips, we'll come back around and just get it just tight enough to where it bolts up. There we go, so about like that. We don't want it too tight again, because if we crack this piece, we're going to be really, really upset. So that is the intake prepped and ready to go for the most part. The next part is going to be removing pieces on the car itself and installing this beast. But to recap, we have the grommets installed, we have the intake MAF sensor, or excuse me, the intake MAF housing and the bracket hooked up. At this point in time would be when you'd want to install the foam piece and the aluminum bracket that would go over this housing right here. So if you're the type of person that doesn't really want the intake noises or as much intake noise, that's when you're going to use some of the supplied hardware that foam right around this opening and seal this off. If people want to hear a video later on a separate video of the different noises that I guess the difference that the noise makes between open and closed, I can do that. But for the time being, I'm going to leave this open because I like all the turbo noises that cars make. So the next step is obviously removing whatever intake you currently have in your car, whichever it's a stock or aftermarket like my big SF kit by Cobb here. Remove that. I'm not going to do an uninstall how-to because depending on what you have, it may not be like what I have. So we're just going to go ahead and blaze through uninstalling this. Uninstall with your factory one is pretty easy. There's a bolt here, down at the bottom, and then you have the coupler. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys, but the install, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So we're going to go ahead and speed through the uninstall of my current big SF. The first thing we're going to install is the bottom brace. I want to say that this is what the intake's going to sit in. This little grommet right here is where the intake's going to sit. But the first thing we need to take off is going to be this bolt that's down here, down at the very, very bottom. It's going to be a 12mm bolt. Go ahead and get that to focus. We're going to use an extension and a 12mm socket. We'll go ahead and pull that out of there. And this bracket is going to sit on top of it. We're not going to stick it underneath. Since we have this foam piece down here, we're going to set it on top. We're going to feed that bolt back into it. So we have the bracket sitting down here nicely with the bolt back here that we just took out and slid in place. We're going to take that factory bolt that you're going to retain for your factory system, and that's going to go into this slotted groove in that bracket. Now that you have this bracket installed, leave it loose so it can slide around, because when we go to install the intake, it's going to take a little bit of finagling to get this in the right spot when everything bolts up. And then when the intake itself is in, we're going to go ahead and tighten back those bolts when we're done. All right, the next step is going to be taking off this factory bracket. This factory bracket's retained for the big SF kit, but it's not going to be used for this carbon fiber piece as it protrudes and it's going to get in the way. So it's two 10mm nuts that are on here. Go ahead and take those off. And then we're going to set that aside. The next piece we're going to install is going to be this tiny little bracket with a grommet and the foam piece. This only goes on one way. In order for it to go on, this rubber grommet needs to be pointing towards the back of the car itself. It's going to seem like it's at a weird angle, but it's going to be holding it from the top. So as you see how I'm inserting it onto the factory stud posts, we're going to use the factory provided nuts that they give us because they're nice and black instead of silver. And we're going to run those down. And we're not going to tighten these up because just like the other bracket or the brother brace down there, these will be snugged up after we get the intake installed because everything needs to be lined up. But that's how this is going to sit. This little insert right here that sits on top, and then a small little screw with lock washer that goes up underneath. And you're going to cinch this down, and the intake basically kind of just snaps into it, those rubber grommets. Pretty easy piece, but getting to it is going to be kind of a pain. Now what I think I'm going to be doing is, instead of removing the front bumper, because that's not going to give me access, because this chassis support right here does have, not necessarily a wall, but a piece of angle that goes down this way. Now what's in the way currently is this plastic shroud that covers up the mechanism for the latch and kind of just molds into the front bumper. This is one separate piece, so we're going to pop off the pop clips on here and see if we can take this plastic piece out to get my fingers underneath to hold this little screw. All right, so what I'm going to use is a little angled pick and a screwdriver to get all these little plastic pop clips pulled up without breaking them all. So go ahead and pull out the small one over here. And then we have a large one right here. There we go. Let's pull it from the top with a pair of pliers. Grab this one. Try not to break them. There we go. All right, now that we have all the pop clips moved out of the way, it appears that you can't really take this out because there's a bracket for the bumper. But what I'm gonna do without breaking it is taking this plastic piece here and pulling it up, out, and bending it away so I can access at least this one, because this one it looks like you might be able to get from the latch mechanism side. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this plastic piece away. So with this kind of bent out of the way and not putting too much stress on it, we're gonna grab our screw and our little fastener piece, and we're gonna go ahead and attach that. All right, for this part, the only way that I'm thinking is gonna work is we're gonna use a little bit of masking tape like I typically do to hold things into tight locations, place it on top of the button head cap screw here, or bolt, and seat this as very well as we can on the angled portion of the Allen key they provided, and we're gonna try to fish this up under without losing it in the car. So make sure you have your aluminum piece ready to go. And I'm gonna try to get this on video of me threading it up under like this, and then screwing this on. Wow, that was honestly seemed a lot easier than I thought it would be. Not easier, but just I think I got lucky. So we're gonna go ahead and leave that on there. We're gonna leave the Allen key, and I'm gonna grab a socket appropriate to the size. We're gonna go ahead and torque that down. All right, so we're gonna use a 17mm socket, a deep well, just to give us a little bit of extra length to it. I'm gonna hold that Allen key, and then we're going to cinch this down. And again, it's made of aluminum, so don't cinch it down too tight, but again, you don't want it coming loose. And then pull that off. If that tape stays on there, you're not gonna see it. I say don't even worry about it. So now that one's on there, let's see if we can get this one installed in a similar manner. All right, so to get this one installed, let's go ahead and take this plastic piece and put this back where it belongs. Again, without breaking it. There we go. And then we'll attach all those fasteners back when we're done. And now we're gonna install this one. All right, so again, we're gonna take the Allen key with a little bit of tape and do the same little trick to hold it on there. Press it in there as hard as we can to get it to stay. And then make sure you have your top fastener ready to go. And it's not gonna go in this one right here, it's gonna go to the one more towards the center. So we're gonna try to feed that up under this opening right here. All right, so what I did is I moved the hood release to drop this Allen key down to where the latch would sit. So it's kind of just sitting and cradled in there. And I'm going to go ahead and cinch this down with my 17mm socket. Again, not too tight because it is aluminum, but enough to where you know it's not going to come off. All right, and I'll get you a nice close shot of what I'm talking about with the positioning of this Allen key. All right, so if you can look down and see where the Allen key is at, it's sitting, if you were to pull on this right here, you can see how it is sitting recessed behind the latch. That should give you a good angle to get underneath of it to feed it in there. All right, so now that we have those two pieces installed, let's go ahead and install all of our pop clips back into this plastic panel. All right, so we're gonna prep the intake kit to be installed. We're gonna take the hose and install it on the MAF housing with the Cobb logo going towards it because of the way the hose angles down. And we're gonna butt it all the way up to the MAF housing screws to give us enough room to clear. And then we're gonna get our clamps prepared by undoing them because we're gonna feed them around. All right, to insert this in here, take this bracket and pull it up as high as we can to give some more clearance. And then we're gonna take this and just kind of dive it in and do our best not to bang it on anything or scratch it. There we go. And then there's gonna be that little post that it sits on that's gonna go in that bracket. And we're gonna make sure it sits in there. And the best way you can see it is looking from this direction right here. You can actually see the post it sits in. And then we're gonna go ahead and get this pipe put on. All right, so we've got that on there and we push it up all the way in there. And then the next thing we're gonna do is, since everything is nice and loose, is we're gonna take these and position it in and twist to give you more room to get these pieces to push down into the rubber grommets, like so. And then this top bracket is going to clamp onto this post. Now that you got the intake installed, go ahead and grab a 10mm deep well and your ratchet, and they're gonna cinch up the two bolts that are down there holding that main bracket, and they're gonna cinch up these two nuts whenever you're happy and satisfied with where the intake's gonna sit. I know I said 10, it's actually a 12mm for that back one as before, so we'll go ahead and cinch that up. All right, next is gonna be this little bracket. I like to support the intake to make sure that this is nice and centered, and then run these nuts down by hand. And then tighten it up with a 10mm wrench. So now the intake is nice and firm and solid. We're gonna go ahead and install our clamps and then install our MAF sensor from our old intake. All right, so we're gonna take the supplied nice black anodized worm gear clamps, and while it's undone, we're gonna feed it back under around so the bolt is facing towards us. And then pinch it together and by hand start running it on there until it starts grabbing. There we go. And then we're gonna position it at a location that makes it easy for us to screw down and is also somewhat aesthetically pleasing. There we go, just like that. And then we're gonna use an 8mm and cinch it down. And it doesn't need to be super tight because this isn't under any sort of boost, it's just pulling air in. So you don't have to put this in super tight, but enough where it's nice and snug. And then we're gonna do the same thing over here on this side of the intake. Next thing is gonna be putting in your MAF sensor, so make sure you have your plug and harness ready to go. Mine's just kind of sitting here. Pull the sticker off, and then you're gonna transfer over your MAF sensor, plug it in, and this intake should be ready to go. Nice and solid, ready to go. All right, so using the supplied hardware that they have and the Allen key that they gave you, the MAF sensor can only go in one way, so you're gonna place it in, and usually the plug is gonna be facing towards the vehicle. So you're gonna drop it down. It does have a nice little O-ring in there, and then you're gonna run these in by hand. All right, then use the supplied Allen key to lightly screw it down on both sides before you cinch it down. And you do wanna make sure this is nice and snug, but not overly tight, because there is air going through here. Now that's nice and snug. Grab your plug and plug it in, and you should be done with your intake install.